Hello, everyone. So today we've got Eddie Stone here. We're going to talk about toxins and health benefits and how society has impacted our health. Now, just before we begin, subscribe to my BitChute channel and also to my YouTube channel. Um, you want to subscribe also to my jasaraclub.com. The links are below in the description. Eddie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Nicholas. Thank you for the invite and the chance to be with you.
Thank you for your time and to come on the show. So where do we begin with all this information with health benefits and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's a big subject, and I agree it can be a challenge sometimes just kind of knowing where to jump in. It seems when I'm invited on, it's coming from this place where people are beginning to recognize the role that toxins or toxicity plays in our health, not just sort of in the moment, right? Acute problems with respiratory issues and otherwise, but our vulnerabilities to degenerative diseases, cardiovascular disease even, or diabetes, or even something like cancer, that people don't think about the role that the environment or environmental toxins or the air that you're breathing or the water that you're drinking or the food and the soil and these things, the role these things can play. And where it, for me, where it all stems from is just kind of looking around us, right, in the modern world we live in. And I appreciate the modern world. I like my smartphone and the computer and all these things, but with all this technology, whether we're talking about things like EMFs or just chemicals or metals that have been assembled, to make your smartphone work. I mean, quite literally, there's 100,000+ toxins. I mean, maybe more used around the world in consumer products, things that you and I and our families use every day that really haven't been studied in terms of kind of their impact on our health in this moment or long term. We know that they can damage DNA, act as free radicals and other things. And so it's a big subject, and one we need to make ourselves at least aware on some level, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the cabal's, agenda for, hundreds of years, their plan was to destroy everything and implement toxins in every aspect of our lives, be it, the television or music or, frequencies from our cooking equipment like microwaves and mobile phones and our food, everything. And it's amazing if, how we would feel, just the imagination of how we would feel if we were to just, rejuvenate everything that they've put in our bodies, and I would really be curious to know how much different I would feel. I mean, it probably would be a miracle, right?
Oh yeah. One of the discussions I've been involved in sort of this space for 30 years. I'm 57 years old. And, one of the things I realize is it's interesting. The human body to me is, it's a work of art or a genius, right? And, kind of how you nurture it, right? You'll affect certain outcomes, but there are certainly things that we're unable to control. But one of the things that happens is a lot of these degenerations in terms of energy level or how sharp the mind is, or physical capacity, it's an incremental loss or reduction. So, we don't have that ability to know from one day to the next what it was like when we were, say, 16 or 17 or 18 and just vibrant, right? We slept well. We could, eat a buffet at night and wake up still skinny, whatever happens to be, compared to, say, when we're in our 50s, this difference. And so I don't think we notice over time this reduction in human performance, whether we're talking physical or mental. And so it's hard to know that incremental loss. And of course, what I know with my specialty about toxins is in that same timeline that I'm describing, there's a cumulative impact on your body. We call it a body burden, right? And that's probably pretty easy for people to think about, but that body burden, and for some people, it has more of an acute or in the moment impact, right? Let's say somebody with respiratory issues or asthmas or things like this. Other people, they can sort of survive it, but there's a certain point where you're not leaping out of bed anymore, right? I don't leap out of bed anymore, right? I kind of throw my feet off and kind of follow the gravity, to the restroom to get ready for my day. But it's just interesting, like you said there, we don't even notice so much as erosion.
So I want to ask you, what you would recommend for us moving forward and detoxifying our body. But just before I get into that, I want to ask you, what is your background? Because you look very educated. And by the way, I love your background. You look like a lawyer. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. So I have a pretty simple background. I'm from North Carolina in the United States, and this is really the region or the area that I grew up in. And I mean, if I go back, my family was involved in construction. My granddad was a builder. My dad was a builder. He and my brother still are today. So, I mean, it's a pretty simple background. I did go to school to the university, and I graduated, but just barely. I have to admit, I wasn't the best student in the world. But what I really learned is that for me to learn and develop knowledge, I really needed to have a passion for it. And sometimes those are things that are obvious for you. But in my case, in the late 1980s, when I was in my late 20s, my mom, Judy, and I'll leap ahead in the story, she's alive and well today, but she was a young mom. She had me when she was just barely 18 years old. And so in some respects, we kind of grew up together. And she began to develop in the late 1980s sort of an illness where she was sort of wasting away in front of our eyes as a family, right? She's catching every cough and cold. She's low on energy. She's losing weight in ways that don't make sense, right? She's not trying to, and like anybody else would do, when you confront these kind of things, we go to the local doctors, then we go to the doctors outside of this area, then we start going to specialists, then we start going to universities in our region with medical centers. And so we're a couple years into this cycle where no one can explain to us why my mom just continues to decline. Mm-hmm. And, we're kind of desperate. We're so desperate at this point in our own little family and friend network. We've got the word out that we're looking for answers. And someone called and said, "Hey, I've got the name of a doctor that's, I want you to know his reputation is as a quack." And where we were in life, we were like, yeah, we'll take the name. We don't really care, right? We just want to explore all our options. And it turns out he wasn't a quack. He was just someone that felt like that toxicities were playing a role in sort of these mysterious illnesses, right? And for us, we don't know about this kind of thing, right? That's all of it's still a mystery to us. But he put my mom on a really strong IV chelation therapy. And for those that don't know, chelation therapies are therapies where they use drug protocols to detoxify the body. Generally, that was put together back in the day for people that had industrial toxic exposures or even radioactive exposures. And what he did was pretty severe in hindsight, probably a little dangerous, but in my mom's case, she responded within a couple of weeks to the point where, her health was returning. Ultimately found out that when she was younger, she had breast implants and her body had developed an autoimmune response. And one of them was sort of leaking a toxic substance into her body. And this was what was causing her problem. So literally, detox saved my mom's life. And there's nothing like a situation like that to kind of wake you up to what you're doing from a health, nutrition standpoint, your environment, sort of the unintended consequences of decisions that you make. And so it really started a 30 plus year journey for me where I not only looked at nutrition, food, diet, exercise, and what I could do for myself. I was in my late 20s. I'd already gained some weight since being at the university, right? When you're young and you're athletic, and my cholesterol is high, my triglycerides are high. I'm on that borderline of a type 2 diabetic. And so I was going to be a statistic, right? One of these people taking high blood pressure medication and blood thinners and all these other drugs. And so it was a wake up call for me. And I began to develop a passion because I do believe the body's genius. And if you just give it something to work with, and when I say that, I really want people to hear me there. If you just give your body a little something to work with, wonderful things can happen. Almost miracle things can happen in terms of energy, vitality, and all these kinds of things. And so through books, through seminars, lecturers, meeting with doctors. I've sat on scientific advisory boards at companies and things of this kind. I became, sort of engrossed in this area, just recognized particularly sort of the dirty little secret of the modern world, and that people don't recognize that man-made chemicals used in everyday household consumer products, in the air, in the soil, on our food supply, they literally are killing us. Mm-hmm. And just as you need to think about eating your fruits and vegetables, I know that sounds so mundane, but just as you need to think about that, or the quality of water, or how you manage stress and you sleep, you likewise need to support your body's native ability to detox. And so it was through my mom's event. I probably rambled on that a little bit too much, but it's through my mom's near-death experience that led me down this path.
So I was reading something today, and that's, by the way, that's beautiful. That's a miracle. And it must mean massive to you. It means it's your mother. And if it was anyone else's mother, it would be fantastic to be able to, look after her like that. So I was reading something today that there's a plant out there on Earth that grows naturally that will cure every single disease, human disease, virus out there. What do you think it was for your mother that helped her?
Well, there was no question that specifically detoxification is what did it for her. And then the case of IV chelations, which in the US is a medical treatment, right? So we're talking about prescriptive medical treatments that are only able to be administered through medical doctors. They used a binding agent or a chelating agent. That's what caused that to be effective. And I'll leap the story forward just a little bit. In 2005, I was introduced to a natural mineral product called zeolite. If anybody's seen me on YouTube or other places before, you've heard me talk about this. But when I was introduced to it, I already knew from experience with my mom and subsequent education that being able to bind with toxins in the body in such a fashion that they're not reabsorbed, and you can kind of support the body's own detox through the bowel, through the lymphatic system, how the kidney, liver, things like this work. If you can bind with these toxins and get them out of the body, then you lower the sort of the body burden, right? If you can just kind of think about, you've got a certain level of pollutant and you lower it, then what happens where the restorative quality or the healing qualities come from is it's your body's own immune system that when you clean the body up and you get rid of these properties that are disrupting hormone function, they're damaging the DNA of the cell, they're getting in the way of just essentially the function of not only the central nervous system, but the immune system, respiratory function. When you sort of remove these properties, the body's performance can improve on its own, right? So you're not curing or treating or mitigating disease, but what you are doing is positioning the body to do those very things it's built for. And so I like the concept, like you just said, that there are plants that can do all these things, right? If we just sort of had this knowledge of the global biosphere and all these dynamics, which I don't know how you would put that together, but as we learn about these things and we put them in motion for human consumption, and what's great about it is in relative terms to drug protocols and other things, this is a very simple, natural mineral to use. And so it's been very intriguing for me when I consider that you can't get away from toxins, right? I mean, you and I, it doesn't matter what we do. You just cannot live in a bubble in such a way you eliminate exposure, because you got to eat, you got to drink something, you're going to breathe, you're going to drink water, you're going to do all these things. And so it's naive to think I can eliminate the toxins from my life so I don't have to consider this as a health strategy. So for me, one of the education points that I'm looking to really make people think about is that detox, whether it's my product or not, in terms of what you do, whether it's green leafy vegetables to support how your body rids itself of toxins, or the quality of the water that you're drinking, or being considerate of the quality of the air in your home, if you can have some positive impact on that. These are things that are just smart strategies to living the best life you can, the most healthy life you can. And the way the world is set up today, you got to be an advocate for yourself. You can't wait for some federal authority to do it, or some global corporate empire or any of these other things. It's got to come from ourselves. And so the energy to do these things, the tools are there, but you got to do a little homework, right? And that's what we've learned.
So, well, what kind of ingredients or supplements would you recommend for somebody like me who's absolutely who has no idea in detoxifying their body?
Well, there's two things. And some of this, I bet if I gave you a pop quiz on it, right, you'd pass immediately because some of this is common sense, right? So as much as you can consider the quality of the air and the water, just the environment that you're in, right? If you live in an industrial environment where you can't really control that, if you can get your hands on air filtration of some kind, right, to just help air quality. If you live in an environment where your water is not coming from a clean source, can you find water filtration, right? Considering the fruits and vegetables you have available, can you get your hands on fresh fruits and vegetables? Is there an opportunity to get any of those that are organic so that you can just have less exposure to synthetic or petroleum-based chemicals used in the growing of those fruits and vegetables? And then I do think it's important to help your body. And so I mentioned zeolite, right? We are massive advocates for using zeolites. And zeolites can come from other companies. They're found on the internet, but we think it's important to consider sourcing and prep to make them effective. And so we have a natural zeolite that we prep for maximal effectiveness. We mill it to a size so that it can get into your cells, which is a nano size. We've got one for the gut. And so if there's sort of a 3-part strategy for me. One is aid your body, right? All those things I talked about, green leafy vegetables, these are things that support your body's ability to detox. But as you're taking the bad stuff out, got to be conscious of putting the good stuff in. Mm-hmm. And unless you have the education or the time to go to the store, buy the proper stuff, prep it properly, the chopping, the cleaning, the right recipes and things like this, then I believe that's the role of supplements. And so when I hear the word supplements, I probably think of it a little differently than most people. I think it's a supplement to the habits that you have. And the better your habits are, maybe the less that you need. But I don't think anybody has that sort of opportunity unless they can be full-time on this as a job in terms of their food preparation, which that's not very many people in a modern world. Then you need to think about, am I getting good sources of fruits and vegetables? We sell a greens drink, right? I'm a big advocate of greens drinks. If those greens drinks can be organic certified, that's another sort of important check mark, because any pollutants that are out there in a fruit and vegetable supply, if it's then concentrated into a drink, such as even like with baby food where it's concentrated, then whatever challenges are there are exacerbated from that concentration. So we are very committed to organic and organic certification so we can have, it's not perfect, but as much assurance as possible about the clean preparations, the non-GMOs of the things we work with. So putting the fresh fruits and vegetables in there as you're trying to eliminate ultra-processed food. And then sort of the final thing, if there's 3 pillars to this, right? Detox, superfoods, put them back in there, build the body. The third one for me that's ignored a lot, and particularly with men, for whatever reason, we've got a real blind spot about this, is to think about how we manage stress. Because stress literally does kill. It's an invisible killer in how it impacts the hormones in our body. It raises the temperature on inflammation in the body, right? It exposes you to oxidative stress and damage that over time is very cumulative. And so whether it's yoga or meditation or a walk in the woods or whatever it happens to be, to sort of give ourselves a break from devices and computer time and phones and things like that to manage stress, that's an equally important part of it. We advocate for the use of CBD oil. We work with an organic CBD oil because we know that interacts naturally with the body's own internal endocannabinoid system to bring balance and to manage stress. We're cautious with people that are using excess amounts of alcohol because that has its own damage that it can create, or even recreational drugs to try to manage the stress that they have. That's not a long-term solution. And so I'm a big advocate for detoxification, putting some good stuff in your body, give it a chance, right? Give it a chance, as well as trying to manage stress. And, while I can't tell you, Nicholas, right now that I can eliminate all your risk of degenerative diseases, but you can lower meaningfully your risk factors. Those things that would rob you of your mental acuity, your physical abilities, those things that would get in the way of you living the best life you can or the life you want. And what at my age, I'm already seeing people in my peer group. Now, I know you're a young guy, but even at 57, I'm seeing people in my peer group that are already becoming prisoners of their bodies because they just don't want to take the time. They're ignoring these issues. And it's just a crying shame, right? It's just a shame that they're going to let the big pharma, big agro, this corporate shove it down your throat sort of thing with consumerism getting in the way of living the best life that they could. And so I'm out here doing the best I can to advocate for seizing control and using some tools. So the zeolite, to me, it's a tool. Things like superfoods or greens drinks or these kinds of things, they're tools. CBD oil, a tool, right, to help us sort of navigate this modern chaotic world we live in. And then you start to consider last year how the entire the chaos of 2020, how that exacerbated everything, right? I think it's more important than ever for people to give these things consideration.
So what's your program like with these, with the CBD oil and the zeolites, you said? Did you say zeolites?
Yes, that's right. So if people want to explore what we do, our zeolite products, we've got a product called Pure Body Extra Strength, and it's a nano-sized zeolite. There's sort of three critical things for a consumer to know so they educate themselves if they go to purchase a product like this. One, all the safety data is on the naturally mined clinoptilolite zeolite. There are lots of synthetics out there, lab-grown, artificially manufactured products, but that's not where the history and the safety data comes from. Zeolites, the clinoptilolite zeolite, the type that we use, we mine it in a pristine environment here in the United States. They actually have GRAS status from the FDA. They've had it for a very long time, which means it's this highest safety mark you can look for. They've got an equivalency with the European Union and all throughout Asia. And so I'm big on looking at things in basic function where there's long-term safety data, right? I'm not just, involved with sales and have a company. I use this, my kids use it, my wife uses it, my friends and family use it. So it's a big deal to me in that regard. So we mill it to this size so that it's small enough to get into the cell. I mean, quite literally, you're made up of, say, approximately 100 trillion cells. And quite literally, this can go into each of them. And the reason that's important is if you consider things like cadmium, lead, mercury, aluminum, even arsenic, some of these other environmental pollutants, heavy metals, volatile organics, things we're exposed to, they can be angstrom size, right? We're talking about, your naked eye is not going to see that. And the zeolite has a property. There's really sort of three properties that are really crucial. One is it has a cage-like structure. So maybe in your mind, someone could envision, say, a sponge or something that looks like Swiss cheese, right? It's got these inconsistent little cages, and they have a negative charge, which on the surface, may not seem like a lot, but the heavy metals and volatile organics and environmental pollutants we're looking to capture and get out of our body, they're positively charged. So just like the north end and the south end of a magnet kind of snap together, that's what creates the binding effect. And what's important for you and me is that the zeolite doesn't have a receptor site in the body. So once this binding takes place, assuming normal renal function, it's out of your body in about a 4 to 6 hour period of time without the side effects you think of with IV chelation or bowel cleanses or herbal cleanses and things like that can create side effects, which make them difficult to use day in and day out. So here's a natural mineral that can be used systemically, meaning every day, all day, because that's what your exposure is, right? And so we get it to the right size, we use it from the right source, and then the final piece of the puzzle is we have a proprietary process where we prep it so that it has a greater ability to bind. And so the way I would sort of describe that to people is zeolites work like antioxidants do, right? You eat a blueberry. Blueberries is super rich in antioxidants, and those antioxidants can neutralize free radicals coming from natural metabolism, environmental pollutants, things like this in your body. It neutralizes it because of an ion exchange. It gives up an electron that neutralizes the free radical, right? So it's less ability to damage your DNA. That's essentially the same ion exchange is how the zeolite works. And so that prep of the cage is that final piece that's important. We prep it with a calcium mix, and that calcium mix makes it gives it a greater ability to absorb and bind. So that's a really critical side of it. We've also got one for the gut, but the principal product that people have these results with that are really what propel our company is the natural nano product. And then the super green juice, I don't know what your diet is. And I'm always hesitant to ask people that, right? So it's very personal. And so I don't like to get into people's business, but if your consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables is enough, right? Mm-hmm. And for most people, the number should be 5 to 7 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables a day. If most people do a slight accounting of the last 30 days, that's not happening. And they don't realize that there's a cumulative impact that can't be erased by one good day of eating. Every day that you don't have these free radicals and micronutrients, these antioxidants and micronutrients in your body, even the minerals that can come from fruits and vegetables, every day you don't have that in there, there's damage that's taking place to your DNA. And over time, there's something called a telomere on the end of the cell, the end of the DNA where cell replication takes place. And as that erodes over time, this is what really ages you. Mm-hmm. And there's some interesting numbers. If you look at the developed world and you take those populations, there's about 4 general mortality curves that we deal with. And one is in the early 20s in most developed countries, there's a mortality curve that's really spikes, right? It's visible. And sometimes it's called the curve of stupidity. It's youthful mistakes, right? Car accidents and things where people just make, youthful indiscretions and decisions that cause death. For children, if they live past about the age of 10, they've outlived most childhood illnesses that would kill them. So, those first 2 there's not a whole lot you and I can do about. But the next mortality curve occurs in the 50s. It's from 50 to 64. And it's where most people have the heart attack, get the diagnosis of cancer, told they have diabetes, all these degenerative diseases that are really the result of lifestyle increasing risk over time. Mm-hmm. I'm 30 or 40 pounds too heavy, and all of a sudden I'm vulnerable to a heart attack or type 2 diabetes, or I've got other issues with cancer because my lifestyle, I smoked, I drank, I didn't do anything that might reduce my risk. And so here it shows up. I'm not being critical. I'm just simply observing these are the facts, right? And so we lose lots of wonderful people in our lives during this 50 to 64 year period. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's not zero sum. We can't reduce all those risks, but the human body can only do stuff for so long. And the number seems to be about 50 to 55 years. And then the last one, you'll find this interesting, is about the age of 85. There's a real spike in the modern world at about 85 with a death rate curve. And it's people getting old, right? Things are catching up. What's interesting about that is about half of those individuals have a degenerative brain issue such as dementia or Alzheimer's. And probably at that point, they might not even know what's going on. But these are things that can be influenced by lifestyle. And that's what I'm an advocate for. Look, I don't have a perfect diet. I just try the majority of the time to get it the right way. And that's what I'm trying to get people to do, is just integrate in their lives things like greens drinks or other kinds of supplements along those lines. And finally, I at least for me, I get pretty wound up. I do shows like this quite often, and I can do them late at night. And man, you look to go to bed and you just got off a show. That's not so easy. So I do use CBD oil, a very natural way to balance the cannabinoid system in the body and help you with that sort of that quality of sleep, but also stress. And so those are my 3 pillars, right? I'm trying to talk about.
So let's talk about the products. Itself, the supplements. How, for example, how would you take CBD? Are they drops that you put under your tongue, or what is it like?
Yeah, that's right. So the CBD that we work with is a tincture-based product. And so if you can, ideally, you'd put a dropper under your tongue and let it sit there for 60 to 90 seconds. A fair amount of that will absorb mucously. The enzymes in your mouth begin to mark and break it down. So it's going to absorb even more quickly as it gets into the gut. And so a pretty high percentage of it will not have to be metabolized by the liver. So it's more quick to the spot of action, right? It's more quickly in your bloodstream. It's more quickly interacting at the cellular level. And so that's the way we advocate it for. You can vape CBD. We don't offer those products because we think the lungs are sort of under enough attack in the modern world anyway. And so that's not something we advocate for, but I would be remiss not to recognize that a more fast way to get into the system is through the lungs. We just don't think that's necessary. And we think there are risks associated with that. So that's how we encourage it. But it's also interesting, if you look at CBD, it can be applied topically. You have receptor sites in the top of your skin. And so we do have a topical product that, along with some plant extracts, can be quite relieving for temporary inflammation and other things, right? We've got some eucalyptus mixed with our CBD, and it's wonderful, right? Particularly as people get a little older in life, they're trying to manage these kind of joint pain issues. And so the topical under the tongue are the ways that right now the technology that we know of and work with are sort of fast. You can take it in a capsule form. And for some people that just can't do something like a tincture, that can be a solution for them. But we're really focused on the balm as well as the tinctures.
So my father suffers from lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. How would that help him?
Well, it's hard to say to a specific person, but what we do know from research that's out there that's ongoing, and one of the things that's gotten in the way of research with CBD, particularly here in the US, is that for a very long time, the federal government considered hemp in the same category it considered marijuana. And even though they're the same plant, they're not the same thing. Hemp is a 0.3 THC or less that makes it compliant. It really has a medicinal purpose. Higher THC count than that is marijuana. That's generally thought of as recreational, although there are some people, oncologists, that use it in conjunction with cancer treatment. So we don't have the research we need. And frankly, just 18, 20 months ago, we got federal laws passed to help us with the research. But for your dad, the one thing we know is that CBD can help to regulate the immune system and the central nervous system by essentially bringing balance or homeostasis to the body, to the endocannabinoid system. And so people that have autoimmune, basically your autoimmune, your system's over responding. That's what's happening with your dad, right? And probably sometimes he's got more problems than others, right? Because he goes through cycles where his system is just overwrought, right? It's inflamed and it's hot and it's running at a high temperature. I don't mean literally a temperature, but it's sort of over revving. And then other times where he's got some peace from it, right? Probably his everyday symptoms are less. And so CBD can help promote that balance that then allows the body to better navigate what's happening with lupus. It's not a cure. It's just about managing the body's system and positioning it better to deal with lupus and other autoimmune issues like that.
So once you start taking CBD, I mean, how long after you start seeing the benefits?
You should be able to notice. Now, it would take a little time for some people's bodies to build up a level, right? Maybe that's 3 to 10 days. But for others, you should be able to see something happening in a few short hours. I mean, it does depend on the body. But like, for example, if you're struggling to sleep, you can give it a try, 15, 20 minutes before bed under the tongue. Most people would find themselves better able to sleep, right? It's almost like they kind of helps bring the mind to neutral so you can sleep better. So it's not one of these things that for most persons has to build up for 90 days. I mean, you may find individually there's some buildup that's necessary, say 3 to 10 days, but for most people, pretty quick reaction. That's the same thing with the zeolite. There are a lot of people that use the zeolite, and within just a couple of days, even modestly supporting that detoxification, lowering that body burden, they can begin to respond with energy, clarity, focus. I mean, here's one thing. When your body is either polluted from environmental factors such as wildfires or whatever, or from food or lifestyle or stress or chaos, you lose executive function. And it's one of those things people don't talk a lot about, but that's ability to self-manage, control excess eating, control how I react from a stressful situation, control fine motor skills, or clarity and focus. People just sort of losing the ability to do that through the day. So what do? They turn to sugar, they turn to caffeine. Not that in moderation there's anything wrong with those things, but if you're finding you need 6 and 7 cups of coffee or 3 and 4 Monster energy drinks to drive through the day, there's some underlying factors there that we need to address. detoxification, perhaps CBD would be some ways to do that.
So you speak about Z-Lite. Could you please explain to me what exactly Z-Lite is? I mean, I have no idea what form it is. Is it a tablet? Is it liquid form? What is it?
Okay, so zeolites, and thank you. I should have given a little deeper explanation before. Zeolites are a hardened mineral. So in our case, we're working with a naturally mined zeolite. So we literally mine this mineral out of the ground in a pristine mining environment here in the US. And we've known about these things. You can go back hundreds of years ago to Chinese clay eating societies. Now, they didn't know they were working with zeolites, but people that had dysentery, which was essentially a death sentence at those times, they'd sort of be cast out of villages, forced to live near riverbeds or riversides because they were constantly thirsty until they sort of wasted away from dehydration, right, where they couldn't hold anything in their body. They may drink water all day, but they can't keep it in there. They were eating clay, whose idea that was to eat dirt. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about. But eventually, people found that they got better. And what we now know is that in some cases, zeolites can act as a viral disruptor of its replication process, right? And so not to suggest that has anything to do with the issues with viruses we talk about today. But we know from what happened there, they have these qualities. And so we mine it here. It's a hardened mineral that, as I said earlier, sort of looks like a sponge. It has these cages. And so what we do when we mine it is we mill it down using sonication to get to the size we want to and prep the cage, but we suspend it in water because that's the easiest way to manage it at that size. You could not manage it dry. It's too small to manage dry. So we use a proprietary process. We trap it in water clusters. And so our Pure Body Extra Strength is in a bottle that you spray into your mouth. And you spray, 2, 3, 4 sprays, morning, noon, and evening hours. You could use it 4 times a day. That would be okay. There's no contraindications. There's no controversy in that regard. People can read the safety data on our website, but there's no contraindications. And so it works by proximity. So literally, as it's moving through your bloodstream, through your cell structure in your body, as it comes in proximity to these things, it binds. It's a very elegant, natural, sort of miracle little mineral in terms of how it works in the body. And then it processes out because there's no receptor sites. Our other product called Pure Body Regular, the difference is that that's not milled to a nano size, but 0.4 microns. That may not mean anything to anybody. It's still incredibly small, but it's just large enough that the majority of its particles will remain in the gut, right? It's a very focused gut health product. So helps with alkalinity, which can help with leaky gut, which is a very common part of sort of the modern world, promotes the growth of good flora, creates an in-hospital environment for bad flora to grow in the gut. And so that's sort of the form. In both cases, we use liquid, though, because we mill them so small, you could not manage them in a powder form.
Wow. Wow, that sounds amazing. So, that's, I definitely want to try that out sometime, it's very, very good. So is there anything did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say, try it out. You have nothing to lose. Everything we do, unconditionally money back guarantee, empty bottle guarantees. And we've been in business for 9 years, and we've learned we got to give consumers the opportunity to try things. And we're, AAA rated with Better Business Bureau and thousands of 5-star reviews. And so we're looking for our customers to have a good experience.
Eddie Stone, thank you so much. What I'll do is I'll put the link below in the description. So anyone that wants to try out, they're curious, or they have a loved one that is suffering and that wants to restore all of, their health again. So the link will be below in the description. Eddie, thank you very, very much. If there's anything else you want to say, please go ahead.
Well, listen, Nicholas, thank you for having me. And for those that stayed with us on the show, I thank you for your time. I don't take it for granted. And if you have questions that come up, we've got a terrific support staff. Chat them up online. You can even call. They'll do their very best to help you.
Thank you, Eddie. Well, thank you very much. And we'll speak again very soon, okay?
Sounds good. Bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye.